brick below, it says dark void.
Fans from around the world have sent letters to his family here.
This one's from Germany. I think that's the class, quite nice card, isn't it?
While he moved to the other side of the world, this place was in his heart.
At Ozzy Osbourne's funeral, no one expected his dog to steal the moment. What happened next left everyone frozen in disbelief. No one expected the day to feel that heavy, not even those closest to Ozzy Osbourne. The skies over Birmingham were gray that morning, as if they understood the weight of what was coming. It was here, in the city where Black Sabbath was born, that Ozzy Osbourne would be laid to rest. Fans had lined the streets hours before the hearse began its slow procession through Broad Street. Some were singing, some were in silence. Others just stood there, eyes red, trying to take in the final goodbye to the man who had given them a sound, a language, and a kind of chaotic comfort. Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness, was going home, and everyone knew this was about an era, a whole world, that was slowly fading with him. What made it even more emotional wasn't just Ozzy's presence, or rather, his absence. It was what happened around him.
Ozzy, how proud are you of Sharon?
I can't believe it myself. She's just amazing.
Sharon Osbourne arrived early, supported by Kelly and Jack. Her eyes were hidden behind dark glasses, but her hand stayed close to the side of the casket, as if letting go might cause everything to collapse. Kelly looked drained, as if the weight of it all had finally pushed her beyond tears. Jack stood near them, more serious than anyone had seen him in years. He nodded occasionally, acknowledging familiar faces, but mostly stayed silent. Rocky's name wasn't said out loud, but in that space, his absence was felt. The little Pomeranian had been more than just a pet. He'd been a kind of emotional anchor for Ozzy, especially during his long battles with illness and pain. When Rocky died in 2024, something shifted in Ozzy. He became noticeably quieter and more withdrawn.
To be honest with you, the way I felt, death would have been a welcome gift.
Few people knew that Ozzy had kept Rocky's ashes in a wooden urn in his music room. It was a private space, but that spot meant something to him. He once told Sharon, "If they ever put me in the ground, put him in there too." And she remembered. Earlier that morning in Buckinghamshire, before the final prayers were said, she'd quietly honored that request. A small velvet pouch carrying Rocky's ashes was placed with Ozzy, just as he'd asked. But that wasn't the part that shocked everyone. Just before the church service began, a soft stir near the front row caught people's attention. It was a dog, Bugsy, the badly burned rescue pup Ozzy and Sharon had taken in just months before Rocky died. Bugsy had never been meant to attend the funeral. Sharon had arranged for him to stay at home with Jack's wife, but somehow, through confusion or maybe instinct, the little mutt had ended up in Birmingham. Jack later admitted they found him already in the back seat of one of the family cars. Nobody knew how he'd gotten there, but it felt wrong to turn him away. Bugsy had grown close to Ozzy, not the same way Rocky had, but in his own way.
Physically supported by their kids Jack, Kelly, and Amy, Ozzy's widow broke down in tears as she laid flowers at Black Sabbath Bridge.
He'd sit beside him on the couch during treatments, follow him from room to room, even sleep at the foot of his bed when Ozzy had bad nights. Sharon would often say, "He doesn't just like you, he guards you." Ozzy used to laugh, pat his head, and call him the little devil with good timing. Now, in the church, surrounded by candles and flowers and the weight of finality, Bugsy started pulling at his leash.
Part of the show I thought was funny when Lola the bulldog puked.
The moment the lid was opened briefly for family viewing, Bugsy slipped away from Kelly's grip, and what happened next didn't make sense. Not at first. He trotted calmly, almost like he knew where he was going. People parted for him, not because they were told to, but because something about that moment told them not to interfere. The music had stopped. The priest looked over but said nothing. Sharon's lips trembled. Bugsy jumped. He climbed gently onto the coffin, paws resting on the smooth wood, nose twitching. Then, slowly, he laid his head down, pressing it right against the edge, right where Ozzy's chest would have been. Kelly gasped. One of the musicians dropped a pick, but no one said a word. It wasn't clear whether Bugsy understood what he was doing, but he didn't move. For over a minute, he just lay there, head down, eyes half closed. That alone would have been enough to stir emotions. But what happened after caught even Sharon off guard. The dog made a sound, a kind of low, long sigh, and then something changed in the air, and that was where everything started to shift. It wasn't clear who noticed it first. Maybe it was the security guard near the side door, or the funeral director standing just off the altar. A few guests turned their heads slowly, unsure of what they were witnessing. Bugsy, still lying on the casket, had begun to tremble, not out of fear or nerves. It was subtle, almost rhythmic. His chest moved in a strange way, his ears perked, and his head tilted slightly to the side. The sound he made wasn't quite a growl, but it wasn't peaceful either. It was like he was sensing something or someone. Sharon stood frozen, her hand still gripping a tissue, her eyes narrowed, watching him.
But right now, right here, today, I'm great.
She leaned slightly toward Jack, whispering something too soft to be heard. Jack glanced at the coffin, then back at his mother. He shrugged, but even he looked unsettled. A faint breeze passed through the church. It was odd, considering the windows were shut, the doors sealed tight. The candles on the front altar flickered just once, then went still again. Someone in the back murmured something about animals feeling things before we do, but it was just background noise. Everyone's focus was still on the dog. Bugsy lifted his head, his eyes locked onto something no one else could see. Then, he did something unexpected. He let out a soft, short bark, sharp enough to echo off the stone walls. And then, he looked behind him, straight toward the empty aisle. That was when the tension in the room shifted. People didn't say it aloud, but something was different. Sharon stepped forward, gently reaching for Bugsy. "Come on, love," she whispered. "Let's get down, yeah?" But Bugsy didn't move. Instead, he turned back toward the coffin, and again placed his head down. This time, he stayed still, completely still. The priest finally stepped up. "We'll begin," he said softly, as though unsure if he was interrupting something sacred. Sharon hesitated, then gave a slight nod. The service began with a reading from Kelly, who struggled to keep her voice even. She spoke of her father's humor, his love for strange movies, his obsession with crime documentaries, and his soft spot for animals. When she mentioned Rocky, her voice cracked. When she spoke about Bugsy, her eyes glanced down at the dog still resting on the coffin. He hadn't moved. After Kelly came Jack. His speech was more composed, but his hands were clenched tight at the podium.
Sorry?
Does it make you feel uncomfortable when you talk about it?
Well, it's not exactly one of my greatest achievements.
He talked about the public side of Ozzy, the rock legend, the wild man, and the performer who made history. But he also shared little things about how Ozzy still asked for beans on toast every other morning, how he kept a VHS of The Exorcist in a drawer even though he hadn't watched it in years, how he once bought 4 copies of the same dog toy just so Rocky wouldn't miss it if it got lost. That drew a few smiles, even laughter. But again, the atmosphere never fully lightened. Then came Sharon. Her voice didn't shake, her expression didn't change, but the words carried more weight than anything else that had been said. He was chaos, and I loved him because of it, not in spite of it. She paused. And through everything, the madness, the tours, the hospitals, the highs and the very lows, there were always a few constants.
Did you have an idea that he had a crush on you?
No.
One of them was music, the other was his animals. She looked directly at Bugsy, her voice softening. He loved that dog. I didn't think he had much left to give after Rocky passed, but then came Bugsy looking like hell but still wagging his tail, and Ozzy said, "That one gets it. He's got fight in him." And from that day, they were bonded. I don't know what he sees now. I don't know if he hears something we don't, but if he does, I trust it. There was a long silence after she spoke. When the final song played, Bugsy stood up. He looked around again, like he was listening for something. His ears twitched. His head tilted one more time. Then he let out another strange sound, as if mourning, and as if responding to something beyond the walls. That sound broke something in the room. Sharon's shoulders dropped. Kelly lowered her head. Even the priest paused mid-blessing. Bugsy finally stepped down from the coffin. Jack reached out for him, but he didn't need to. The dog walked slowly back to the front row and curled up beneath Sharon's chair. No one said it aloud, But almost everyone who sat in that room would later say it was like Bugsy knew when to let go, as if he'd been waiting for something, some kind of sign, and whatever that sign was, it had come and gone. Outside, fans still lined the streets, holding up signs, shirts, and old records.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Come on! Come on!
Some had even brought candles and left them near the Black Sabbath bench. No one outside knew what had just happened inside, but those who were there would carry that moment with them. And yet, there was more to what happened, and Sharon was the first to find it. The next morning, Sharon Osbourne woke up to silence. That alone unsettled her. For years, mornings in their Buckinghamshire home began with either Ozzy's cough, Bugsy's paws tapping on the floor, or the faint sound of a kettle. But now everything felt muted and too still. She walked downstairs slowly. Bugsy was already up, sitting beside the glass door that looked out onto the garden. His ears were up, eyes fixed on something beyond the trees. Sharon followed his gaze, but saw nothing unusual. Just the same backyard Ozzy had spent most of his last month sitting in, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the wind. Bugsy just stared. Sharon turned to make tea, but before she reached the counter, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Jack. "Mum, you need to see what someone sent me." She called him right away. He sent the video without much delay. It had come from one of the private photographers they hired for the funeral. Sharon opened the video, not sure what to expect. It showed the moment Bugsy had jumped onto the coffin. She remembered it clearly, but this angle was different. It was closer. The camera caught every second of Bugsy's face, the rise and fall of his chest, the look in his eyes. Then came the moment when the dog tilted his head and made that strange sound. Sharon had remembered it as emotional, but the video caught something else, a flicker. Behind Bugsy for just a second there was a shift in the air near the altar, a faint distortion, like heat rising off pavement. But it wasn't near a candle or light source. Sharon paused the video, rewound it, and played it again. Sharon stared at the screen, the tea now forgotten. She zoomed in, but the image pixelated. Then the feeling crept in slowly. It felt like something they hadn't been able to explain had been present in that room.
Doves of peace. Everybody loves doves.
She didn't say anything to Jack right away. She wanted time to think, time to understand. Later that afternoon, she sat down in Ozzy's old music room. The house staff had left it untouched. His guitars were still hanging on the walls. One of his worn hats still hung on the coat rack. In the far corner sat the small shrine he'd kept for Rocky. Sharon sat in his old chair. Bugsy came and curled up at her feet. She reached into the drawer next to her. She opened it without thinking. To her surprise, the first page was a list. It detailed how he wanted things handled if anything ever happened to him. The notes, written in his usual messy handwriting, made it clear he preferred a quiet goodbye, a specific song, and to be laid to rest with something personal. It was simple, thoughtful, and completely in character. Sharon froze as one of the lines caught her breath. She stared at it, her heart racing. Ozzy had written this long before he ever got seriously ill, and before Bugsy came into their lives. She turned to look at the dog now, resting by her feet. He lifted his head, blinked slowly at her, and laid it back down. She reached for her phone again, this time texting Kelly. "Come by tonight. Bring Jack. I found something." By evening, the family gathered around Ozzy's old chair. Sharon showed them the video, then the notebook. Kelly went pale. Jack sat still for a long time. No one claimed to understand what it meant, but they didn't argue either. Meanwhile, Bugsy remained calm, as if he'd already accepted something they were just now realizing. The next day, Sharon received a call from Ozzy's old tour manager from the 90s. He'd been in town for the funeral but had left early. Now, he sounded shaken. "I didn't want to say anything during the service," he said, "but I saw something. I thought I imagined it. Now I'm not so sure." He described the moment during the song when Bugsy stood up and how he felt something brush past him in the aisle. No one else had been near, but the air had changed, just for a moment. "It felt like he walked past me," he said. "Not the dog, Ozzy." Sharon just listened. Before they hung up, he added something else. He used to joke, years ago, that if there was a way to sneak back and watch his own funeral, he'd find it. Said, they'd never see me coming. I'd be there in the smoke. Later that night, Sharon stood in the hallway outside Ozzy's music room. She looked in, hand on the doorframe, unsure of what she believed anymore. Then she saw it, Bugsy, sitting in the middle of the room, staring at the chair, and the chair had started to rock, ever so gently. There was no draft and no movement from the dog. Sharon remained in the hallway, frozen. Bugsy stayed still, watching the chair, like he was waiting. Sharon stepped into the room. The floor creaked, but the chair continued. She placed her hand on the backrest, and instantly it stopped. Bugsy walked over and nudged her leg. She knelt down and held him close, heart pounding. The following days were filled with the odd quiet that follows every funeral. People had gone home. Flowers were still arriving. There were messages from old friends and even older fans, some of them telling long stories she had forgotten herself. Jack and Kelly were handling most of that, trying to keep her from being overwhelmed. They stayed close, always nearby, and Sharon let them. Bugsy, though, was the one who stayed right by her feet. He barely left her side. If she sat at the kitchen table, he'd curl up under it. If she went to her room, he followed. Even at night, when he used to sleep in the hallway, he now lay right outside her door. It didn't bother her. In fact, she grew to expect it. One morning, about a week later, Sharon found Bugsy sitting in the middle of the living room, staring at Ozzy's old slippers. They were still beside the chair. She hadn't moved them. For a while, she'd meant to pack things up, store them neatly somewhere. But now, looking at Bugsy staring at the slippers like they meant something more, she left them as they were. Later that same day, Jack came into the kitchen holding a photo album. "Mom, we should do something with all these," he said. "There's loads we've never shared." He flipped through the pages, pausing at one where Ozzy was in the backyard, holding Bugsy as a pup. Sharon smiled, touching the corner of the photo. "Your dad really loved that dog," she said. "Said he kept him sane when things got too loud." Kelly joined them and pointed to a photo of Ozzy and Lemmy, laughing during a radio interview. "People should see these," she said. "Not just the stage stuff, the normal stuff." That night, they talked about putting together something online, a digital archive, not a tribute full of sadness, but a place where fans could share their own moments too. Photos, voice notes, stories, a living record of who he was, not just what he did. The idea gave them something to work toward. They contacted a few people from the fan club. One graphic designer offered to help for free. A programmer in Manchester reached out, saying he'd build the site himself if it meant honoring Ozzy. Bugsy stayed around for most of the planning. Sharon joked that he was listening in, guarding Ozzy's legacy. There were hard moments, of course. The first time Sharon tried to watch an old interview, she turned it off halfway. But little by little, the heaviness has begun to shift. What do you think Bugsy saw that day in the church? Was it instinct, memory, or something beyond what we can explain? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take on it. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.